My sister handed me Grandma's necklace with a smile, then called the police before dessert was served. 20 minutes later, I was in cuffs. The pearls still smelled like her perfume. And our mother? She turned away, not a word, not even a blink. They said it was a misunderstanding, that I'd had too much wine, that I always made things difficult. But what they really meant was I was easier to erase than to defend. That was the night I learned blood makes families, but silence makes outsiders. I didn't just walk away, I came back and bought the house they threw me out of. I painted over their initials and planted wildflowers where the vineyard died. Let me tell you how. The flashlight cut through the dusk, landing squarely on the pearls around my neck, still warm from my skin, still shimmering like they belonged to someone who deserved to wear them. I blinked against the glare, trying not to squint, trying to stand straight. A uniformed officer's voice crackled from somewhere above the beam, but the words were drowned out by the silence that had swallowed the vineyard just moments before. It hadn't started like this. It started with a dress. "It'll fit," Vanessa said earlier that evening, standing in our mother's old dressing room, still wearing the silk robe with the embroidered V on the cuff. Barely. I stood stiffly in the doorway, watching her unzip the garment bag. Ivory silk. Vera Wang. Of course, she peeled the plastic back like unveiling a sacred artifact. "Wear this," she said. "It'll keep Mom from raising her eyebrows too much." Then she handed me the necklace, our grandmother's pearls, soft and perfect in their oval gleam. She placed them in my palm like they were nothing, like I was doing her a favor. Her smile was thin as sewing thread. "You sure?" I asked. She shrugged. "Better around your neck than stuck in some drawer." But now, with police lights bouncing off champagne flutes and whispers snaking through the party crowd, I knew what I should have known then. Vanessa never gave anything away without calculating the return. Deborah's 50th birthday gala was the kind of event you see in lifestyle magazines, the kind with a celebration of elegance tagline and a curated hashtag. Twinkle lights curled around the oak trees. A string quartet played near the lavender bushes. Waiters with starched sleeves passed around goat cheese tarts and rosé and stemless glasses. My mother wore something with sequins and a neckline designed to say, "I'm not old, I'm classic." She looked radiant, even when she was pretending not to be orchestrating every detail. I hovered near the back patio, clutching a flute of water and wishing I'd worn more deodorant. The dress fit surprisingly well. Too well. For once, people glanced at me, not as the family's stray artist, but as someone who belonged here. A few of Vanessa's friends even complimented my look, mistaking me for a cousin or a new hire at the winery. I didn't correct them. Then came the toast. Vanessa raised her glass with perfect poise. "To our mother," she began, her voice slipping easily into the kind of tone that sounded sincere and rehearsed, "who taught us the value of grace, resilience, and a well-paired Pinot Noir." Laughter, clinking glasses. My smile held like a paper mask. Then she gasped, loud enough to rise above the quartet, enough to silence the cutlery and tilt every head. "My necklace!" she shrieked, hand flying to her collarbone. My pulse pounded instantly. People turned. Murmurs flared. "It was just here," she said, voice tremulous. I gave it to Rachel, but oh my God, did anyone see where she went?" I stood rooted to the flagstone. Several faces turned toward me at once. The quartet trailed into discordant silence. Deborah's mouth parted. Someone whispered, "Should we call security?" "I have it," I said quickly, voice cracking. I fumbled for my clutch, an old leather thing I'd found at a flea market. My fingers shook as I opened it, the clasp sticking slightly. Nestled beside my inhaler and a half-melted lip balm were the pearls. They didn't look elegant anymore. They looked planted. "That's not possible," Vanessa said faintly, eyes wide. I just saw them on the dresser. Why would she—" I tried to speak, but words dissolved on my tongue. Ethan moved closer to Vanessa, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. Deborah didn't say anything. She didn't look at me. A guest must have called them because within minutes a police officer was on site, stepping through the iron gate like this was just another Friday night call. The way he asked for my ID made it feel like I'd already failed a test I didn't know I was taking. I handed over the necklace, my fingers aching as they uncurled. Deborah still hadn't said a word. The officer asked if I'd mind stepping outside. I said nothing. I walked past the string quartet, past the guests who had suddenly remembered their drinks, their phones, anything but me. My heels tapped along the gravel path, tap, 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 each one sounding like punctuation. Halfway to the driveway, I heard Vanessa call out behind me. Her voice was bright and sweet and poisonous. "That's the last family event you'll ever ruin." I didn't turn around, but I felt every eye trailing me as if they were etching this moment into their memory, storing it away like fine china they'd never use. Lavender hung in the air. The freshly mowed grass gave off its green, aching scent. My hands trembled so badly I couldn't reclasp my clutch. Somewhere deep inside, something that had long been cracked began to split wider, and the silence of my family, their well-practiced, decorated silence, roared louder than the sirens ever could. Vanessa got the bedroom with the vineyard view, French doors, balcony, afternoon light. I got the old maid's quarters, low ceiling, linoleum floor, and a view of the side of the garage. Mom called it artsy, like the word could make it romantic. "It's creative," she said, sweeping her hand at the exposed pipe near the window. "All that space to think." I was 13. What I wanted wasn't space. I wanted someone to notice I was there. The walls in that little room were off-white, nicked from past tenants and half-hearted paint jobs. I put posters up, Frida, Basquiat, early Joan Mitchell, and tacked paper to the closet doors to sketch. That year, I started painting local murals, bus stops, abandoned barns, a bakery wall where the owner let me exchange art for bagels and tips. Meanwhile, Vanessa was winning gold stars, debate team ribbons, National Honor Society, first chair violin. She had shelves for trophies and a new bulletin board each year. She didn't need to ask for praise. It found her like bees find lavender. One Sunday, I gave Mom a painting. It was a watercolor of her holding a cup of coffee at the kitchen counter, messy hair, soft eyes. She blinked when I handed it to her, smile uncertain. "Oh," she said, tilting it slightly, "that's very raw." Later that week, I found it in the garage, stacked between a broken lamp and a Christmas wreath. Dad didn't say much. He didn't really notice. He spent weekends tending to the vineyard's books and sneaking naps during CNN panels. Once, when I sold my first mural for $500 cash, I came home flush with pride. I showed him the envelope. "Good," he said, flipping through the bills. "Vanessa's internship in D.C. needs a deposit." I stared at him, stunned. He tapped the envelope against the table. "You don't need praise. You need character." That night, I painted a mural of a fox curled under a grapevine on the back of the tool shed. He never asked about it. Senior year, Vanessa started dating Ethan. She was 17 and already looked like someone with a future featured in alumni newsletters. I was 16, still hiding paintbrushes in my backpack. One weekend, while she was away at a debate invitational, I snuck into her room. I didn't touch anything at first. I just walked around. Her closet smelled like bergamot and leather. Her dresser was covered in gold-capped makeup, color-coded to her planner. Her world felt clean, curated, effortless. Then I saw the dress. It was folded over a padded hanger, burgundy satin, the kind that shifts with light. I pulled it off the rack and held it up to my body in the mirror. The reflection startled me, not because I looked beautiful, but because I didn't look like me. I looked like someone they might actually root for. I didn't wear it for long, just a minute, long enough to imagine what it would feel like to walk into the kitchen and have Mom do a double take. "Wow," she'd say, "you clean up well." But I never got the chance. The next morning, Vanessa stormed into my room. "You wore it." Her voice was quiet and sharp, like a violin string drawn too tight. I opened my mouth, but nothing came. "That dress is dry clean only, Rachel," she snapped. "You'll stretch it out." I mumbled something about just trying it on. She stared at me for a long second. "You can't just slip into my life like it fits." She left without waiting for a reply. I didn't think much of it until the next morning when Ethan's watch went missing. He had come over the night before to help Vanessa prep for a college panel. They were in the living room while I worked on a sketch in the kitchen. He left around 10. At breakfast, Vanessa's voice was laced with concern. "Ethan says he left his Rolex here. You haven't seen it, have you?" I blinked. Why would I? She glanced toward Mom, who had stopped stirring her coffee. "Maybe check your things," Vanessa said gently. I did, if only to prove her wrong. But the watch was there, in my pillowcase, nestled between an old paperback and my earbuds, like a trapdoor in a mystery novel. I couldn't breathe. I looked at Mom. She looked away. Later that day, she pulled me aside. "We're not calling the police," she said firmly. "We don't air laundry like that." "But I didn't. I don't want to hear it." Her jaw was tight. "Your sister's under enough pressure." That night, I lay in bed in the maid's quarters, listening to the drip from the pipe in the wall. I stared at the ceiling, knowing exactly what had happened, but also knowing it didn't matter. In this house, perception always outweighed truth. And I wasn't misunderstood. I was expendable. 1 week later, I came home from work at the bakery, hands sticky from frosting, apron stained with coffee, and paused outside the kitchen. Vanessa was inside with Mom slicing oranges for sangria. "She just wants attention," Vanessa said, her voice light. "You give her an inch, she'll burn the house." Mom didn't answer, but she didn't disagree. While Vanessa posed with wine glasses and hashtags, I scrubbed motel baseboards in exchange for Wi-Fi and a wall I could paint. That was the deal. A half-empty motel off I-5 in Merced, managed by a man named Pete who didn't ask questions. He just handed me a key, pointed to the cracked wall above the vending machines, and said, "Make it not suck." So I did. The mural was of oranges and marigolds and one lone fox standing at the edge of a field. Pete liked it so much he let me stay 3 extra nights. That was how I survived my mid-20s. Small exchanges, small victories, stringing together couches, murals, and jobs that paid in breakfast sandwiches and bus fare. Back then, I went by R.L. Fox and didn't talk about family. I didn't own a car. I carried my paints in a rolling suitcase missing one wheel. I ate fast food in parking lots and used a busted iPhone to track auction notices posted on government sites. "You'll never make it without this family," Vanessa had once told me in that sweet tea voice of hers. She was wearing a cream blazer and pearl studs, the picture of someone who belonged in boardrooms and bridal boutiques. I never told her she was half right. I couldn't make it with this family. That was the truth. One morning in early 2017, after a mural gig in Fresno, I met an old motel owner named Daryl who told me about foreclosure auctions. He'd just lost a rental property to the bank and said they'd sold it for pennies compared to what he owed. "Look into trustee sales," he muttered over instant coffee and powdered creamer. "There's gold in broken drywall." I Googled it later that night in a laundromat with free internet and no soap. Trustee sales, pre-foreclosures, tax liens. Words I didn't understand but forced myself to learn. I wrote terms down in a sketchbook between outlines of crows and collapsed barns. By 2018, I created a business entity, Sunridge Capital LLC, named after the street where I first slept in a borrowed car. I used a P.O. box for the address. No one knew it was me. That was the point. The first property I bought was a boarded-up duplex in Stockton. I painted it myself, inside and out, traded labor with 2 other broke artists in exchange for beds and studio space. We lived on instant ramen and Trader Joe's handouts. Within 6 months, I sold it for triple what I paid. The check had my LLC's name on it, not mine. Every time I signed a closing document, I wore a hoodie. Sometimes I dyed my hair black, sometimes red. People remembered tattoos and perfume, not the woman who barely made eye contact and paid in cashier's checks. Sunridge bought 7 more properties over the next 4 years. Small motels, neglected duplexes, even a coffee shop that still sold my art on the walls. I kept my name off everything, let the LLC file taxes, let brokers assume I was someone's assistant or admin. I liked it that way. I liked watching my own reinvention from the sidelines. Meanwhile, Vanessa was busy being visible. I didn't follow her accounts, but people sent me screenshots. Her wedding, her book deal, her TEDx talk, titled "The Legacy We Build." She smiled in every photo, teeth white as snow, hand gently resting on Ethan's shoulder like she'd been airbrushed into domestic perfection. Then, in late 2021, a friend texted me a link. "Recognize this?" she wrote. It was a Zillow listing. Historic 5BR Napa estate, fixer opportunity, bank owned. There was no address listed, just the photos. But I didn't need the map, the gate, the archway, the sunroom with the curved windows where I'd painted wildflowers as a teenager. Where Vanessa once told me I was wasting time. The estate had fallen into foreclosure, the description was hopeful. Elegant bones, prime vineyard views, bring your imagination. I felt nothing at first, not anger, not joy, just silence. Later that week, I drove past the property just before midnight. I wore a hoodie, naturally. The gate was still there, but the paint was peeling. One of the lanterns was out. I parked across the street and walked the perimeter, hands in my pockets. Through the sunroom window, I saw it, my old mural. Faded, sun-bleached, cracked from time and water damage. But it was there, a fox among grapevines, still curled in the corner where no one ever looked. I whispered to myself, let's see what sentimentality is worth. It wasn't just about the property, it was about what they told me I couldn't do, what they laughed at when I said I wanted to create something of my own. I didn't want revenge, I wanted permanence. No one at the Napa County Courthouse looked twice at the woman in the hoodie holding a $3.3 million cashier's check. I liked it that way, just another blurred face in a room full of linen blazers and monogram briefcases. The kind of place where everyone pretends they're not watching the bidding, even as they mentally outmaneuver each other between sips of black coffee. The room smelled faintly of old oak, new paper, and quiet greed. I sat near the back, the check tucked inside a canvas tote I'd screen printed with a fox. My nails were clean but unpolished. My hair, now a warm auburn, fell in soft waves under the hood. I kept my eyes low, tracking the rhythm of the auctioneer's voice more than the numbers themselves. The estate didn't come up until late morning. Historic vineyard property, the auctioneer read aloud. Lot 472, 5-bedroom, foreclosed. Starting bid, $2.5 million. I watched the room shift, heads tilted, a few whispers. Some recognized the address. Others didn't care. Everyone smelled opportunity. The first bid came from a man in a navy blazer, then another from a woman clutching a leather folder. The numbers ticked upward, quick at first, then more measured. At $2.8 million, the room thinned. By $3.1 million, only 2 bidders remained. Then I nodded, once, deliberately. $3.3 million, the auctioneer confirmed, looking up. Silence, a beat passed. Then 2, no one countered. Sold Hochrachter, he said, gavel falling like a gavel in a dream. Just like that, it was mine. I signed the documents under my LLC's name. The woman processing the paperwork didn't blink. She handed me the keys like they meant nothing. Like they didn't unlock 20 years of silence and shame and Sunday mornings that smelled like lemon polish and rejection. I left the courthouse without a word, got into the rental car and drove toward the estate, each mile folding time inward like origami. I passed vineyards dressed in spring green, rows of grapevines still shaking off their winter sleep. It had been years since I saw this land up close, long enough for the roads to feel both foreign and familiar. The house came into view just after sunset. It looked smaller than I remembered. The vines were overgrown, climbing too high over the stone archway. One of the shutters hung askew. The mailbox was missing a hinge, but the bones, Vanessa would have said, were elegant. I parked in the circular drive and stepped out barefoot, feeling the cool gravel press into the soles of my feet. I walked slowly, deliberately, as if the house might bolt if I startled it. The porch creaked when I stepped on it. I didn't knock. I used the key. The door opened easily. Inside, the air was stale with dust and old citrus. I moved through the foyer like a ghost in reverse, not haunting, but reclaiming. The chandelier above the staircase still hung slightly off-center. The hardwood floors moaned in places only I remembered. I found light switches, one by one. Only a few worked. The kitchen was dim. I sat at the marble island and pulled a carton of cold Chinese takeout from my bag. Orange chicken and chow mein. I ate in silence, the kind that isn't lonely, just deep, the kind that follows storms. I wandered after that, room to room, fingertips brushing wallpaper. I opened doors I used to be forbidden from entering. I peered into the wine cellar, still half-stocked with bottles labeled in Vanessa's handwriting. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Then I came to the library. The room was darker than I expected. Dust clung to the books, thick enough to obscure titles. But on the doorframe, low on the inside curve, I found them. VR carved in a teenage hand, shallow but clear. Vanessa rose. I stared at it for a long time, then I went to the garage and pulled out my brush roll. I mixed gold and charcoal, pigments I always carried. The brush was small, the kind used for miniature detailing. I didn't sand the wood, I didn't scrub the initials. I simply painted over them, stroke by steady stroke. Gold swirled where bitterness once lived. I didn't flinch. Somewhere down the hall, a light bulb buzzed and died. When I finished, I didn't feel triumphant, just steady, like water returning to level. I walked back to the foyer, opened the front door, felt the evening breeze roll in with the smell of blooming lilacs and distant smoke from someone's fireplace. I left the door ajar, not wide, just enough, an invitation, or a warning. The scream hit the ceiling so hard it seemed to rattle the light fixture, a burst of sound that cracked the air like thunder before rain. You? You bought this place? Vanessa stood in the threshold, like a gust of fury wrapped in designer wool, her suitcase wheels tangled in the edge of the drop cloth I'd laid out that morning. The wind pushed in behind her, scattering golden leaves across the foyer and lifting the scent of wet wood and primer into the air. Her voice echoed through the half-renovated entryway, bouncing off freshly painted trim and empty spaces where family portraits used to hang. I didn't look up. My brush moved slowly, tracing a thin line of gold across the crown molding. Every stroke was deliberate. The gold leaf clung delicately to the wall, catching the afternoon light like a sliver of something sacred. "You can't be serious," Vanessa barked, stepping inside. "You bought this house. With what? Mural money?" I capped the paint jar, wiped my fingers on a cloth, and turned to face her fully. "With a cashier's check and a clean credit line, the bank didn't ask for a family tree." She blinked. Her mouth opened, then closed again, as if searching for a script that no longer applied. "This is mine," she snapped, her voice a mix of disbelief and panic. "You don't get to take this from me." "You took it from yourself," I said, "years ago." She swept a glance around the foyer, and I saw her flinch. The carpeting was gone, replaced by exposed oak and canvas. The chandelier was wrapped in plastic. Her kingdom dismantled. The walls she used to strut past had been stripped bare, as if the house itself was waiting to be reimagined. "What gives you the right?" she demanded, her voice trembling now. "After everything, you waltz in here with your LLC and your brushes like you earned this." I didn't answer. I dipped my brush again and returned to the wall. She laughed, sharp and bitter. "You think paint and plywood make you better? That buying this place means you win?" "No," I said without turning. "Owning it means I'm done playing your game." The door creaked again behind her, and Deborah stepped in slowly, as if unsure whether she belonged. She held a cardboard box, one of those grocery store ones with the handle cutouts, and it bulged at the bottom. From the open flaps, I saw the gleam of plastic trophies and a velvet sash reading "Most Likely to Lead." Vanessa whirled. "You brought her?" Deborah looked from her eldest to me and said nothing. "She knew," Vanessa accused. "Didn't she? You knew Rachel bought the house." Deborah nodded, a tiny motion that barely disturbed the air. "I found out later," she said softly, "after the deed changed hands." Vanessa scoffed. "You lied to me." Deborah stepped forward and placed the box gently on a cloth-covered bench near the stairs. "You never asked." The words hung there like smoke. I turned my head slightly and said, "She thought you might want these." Vanessa looked at the box, disgust plain on her face. "You think plastic memories can fix this?" She pulled a trophy from the box and held it up. "You want this, Rachel? Want to hang it in the study right above the fireplace you never got to sit by?" "I'm not redecorating your ego," I said. Her hand clenched around the trophy. "You always wanted to be me." I finally looked her in the eye, number I wanted to be seen. That shut her up. For a moment, the wind outside was the only sound. Deborah stepped closer but didn't speak. I could feel her watching me, really watching me, for the first time in years. There was something unsure in her face, like a woman waking up in a house she didn't build. "This was always her home," she murmured. The confession slipped out like breath-fogging glass. Vanessa's head snapped toward her. "Excuse me?" Deborah blinked, startled by her own words. Vanessa dropped the trophy into the box and took 2 long strides toward me. "You set me up." "I gave you every chance to be better," I said, voice low. "You just kept choosing the version of me that made you feel superior. You tricked us all." "No," I said, picking up my brush. "I survived you all." She lunged. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't theatrical. It was just a blur of frustration and defeat wrapped in silken boots. Her hand reached for my collar, but I stepped back, calm as tide. The red light of the security camera blinked above her head. She stopped, Her hand dropped. We stood there for a long moment, breaths heavy, the paintbrush trembling ever so slightly between my fingers. Vanessa turned without a word, grabbed her suitcase, and stormed out. The door slammed behind her with the weight of a decade. Deborah remained. She glanced at the box, then at me. Her eyes were glassy, but her face didn't fold. "I didn't know what I was doing," she said. "You did," I replied. "You just didn't think I'd remember." Her shoulders slumped. "I was wrong." I said nothing. She stepped forward. "Can we talk?" I tapped the brush gently against the rim of the jar. The gold shimmered like a sealed wound. "Send it in writing," I said. "My assistant filters." Deborah nodded, once, then left. The scent of citrus oil still clung to the corners of the foyer, like the ghosts of old dinner parties. Somewhere, beneath layers of paint and polish, I could almost hear the laughter that had never included me. I remembered standing on the stairs as a teenager, unseen in a room filled with congratulations not meant for me. Now, the laughter was gone. All that remained was the echo of Vanessa's disbelief and our mother's shame. I moved slowly through the hall. Once they were gone, brushing my fingers along the banister Vanessa had once slid down as a child. My own hand had been slapped away when I tried the same. Small things, small wounds. But in a house like this, small wounds had a way of echoing. I paused at the base of the stairs and looked up into the dim landing above. For a moment I considered calling out, but there was no one left to answer. The quiet wasn't empty, it was earned. In the dining room, the long table was still covered in a plastic sheet. Dust motes drifted through a shaft of amber light, making the space feel like a cathedral caught mid-sermon. I sat at the head chair, the one Deborah used to command like a queen. I rested my arms on the table and exhaled. "I'm not here to replace you," I whispered. "I'm just done being erased." Later, I returned to the foyer and resumed painting. Each brushstroke was a claim, a name signed in motion. The gold trim curled like vines, delicate but impossible to ignore. When I finally stood back, the wall glowed, and outside, the wind kept moving, but it no longer howled. Inside, my silence was not the absence of sound, it was sovereignty. Vanessa once called me a thief, said it with mascara tears and a voice that cracked on cue. But now the San Francisco Chronicle called me something else. The Quiet Tycoon. That headline sat folded neatly beside a bowl of wildflowers on the reception desk of Fox Studio and Residency, the former estate turned artist haven. I didn't display the article. One of the resident artists, Clara, who painted abstract oceanscapes, cut it out and taped it to the fridge like a school project. I hadn't the heart to remove it. Outside, rows of wildflowers stretched where grapevines once grew. The soil had softened. Bees wandered lazily across black-eyed Susans and baby's breath. Sometimes I thought about the vineyard, how it had demanded pruning, structure, rows. Wildflowers didn't ask for order. They just grew. The open studio event was casual. A few local journalists, some donors, and half a dozen artists displaying sculptures made of salvaged wood or canvases that smelled faintly of turpentine. I served lemonade in mason jars. A folk duo played on the veranda. No family was invited. Instead, I sent Deborah a bottle of Pinot Noir from the rewilded vines. The label read, "Second Bloom." I signed the card only with my initials. She didn't reply, but a week later, a text arrived. "You looked happy in the Chronicle photo." No apology, no explanation, just a 6-word acknowledgement that I existed. I left it on red. Upstairs, the ceiling of the ballroom had become my canvas again. I painted in the mornings, barefoot, light pouring in from windows I'd scrubbed myself. The scaffolding creaked like old bones. I liked the sound. It reminded me I was still alive, still moving. I played Vanessa's voicemails while I worked, 17 in total. They ranged from biting to begging, each one a layer of emotional archaeology. Some days I turned the volume low, just enough to catch her rhythm. Other days I played them loud enough to drown the silence. "This house was mine," she said in one. "It's just a phase," in another. I didn't mean to, in the last. I never returned the calls. Instead, I sent the Chronicle a short quote for the follow-up profile. "You can rebuild with silence." They printed it in bold serif font beneath a photo of me holding a brush to the ballroom ceiling. I wasn't smiling, but I wasn't hiding either. The final touch of the mural came on a quiet Sunday. I stood on the scaffold with the sun behind me, brush in hand. I leaned close to the corner panel, just above the trim where light never quite reached. There, I painted a single wildflower, an aster, small and purple and brave. And beneath its stem, in letters no bigger than my thumbnail, I carved my initials, REF, hidden in plain sight. Later that night, as twilight made shadows dance across the fresco, I sat at my desk by the old library window. A breeze stirred the corner of the Chronicle article. My laptop chimed. It was an email. Subject, "Thank you." The sender was someone I didn't know, a young artist, 19, maybe 20. Her message was short. "I grew up like you. I thought I was the only one." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I smiled. Outside, the wind moved through the wildflowers, and inside, everything was still. As the wind moved through the wildflowers outside, I sat beneath the fresco I painted with my own hands, my initials tucked quietly among the blooms. There was no applause, no family watching, just silence and peace. Sometimes the home we need isn't the one we inherit, it's the one we build after being left out. Forgiveness doesn't always come wrapped in words. Sometimes it's simply letting go, planting something kinder where something cruel once grew. If this story stirred something in you, I'd love to hear what it made you remember. After all, quiet voices still carry, especially when we choose to listen. I read her message twice, then a third time, each word landing softer than the last. Maybe she wasn't the only one. Maybe I wasn't either. If you've ever felt like the quiet one, the forgotten one, or the one left out of the story, know this: your voice still matters, even when it shakes, especially when it shakes. I'd love to hear your story too, if you're ready. Sometimes all it takes is a sentence to remind someone they're not alone.